Welcome to another episode of The Plunge, and we are knee-deep into the NBA playoffs in the first round. And so let's start with the Lakers and the Suns. And by the way, we're recording this on a Monday night, so anything that happens after this, we haven't covered. So Lakers and Suns. The Suns, they win by about 10 against the Lakers yesterday, tying the series 2-2. But the more important headline is that AD will be out for Game 5, and that is tomorrow. So, Nate, this probably is a strategic move for the Lakers because, okay, it's Game 5, heading back to Phoenix. You could probably just drop this game, hope AD gets a lot better for Game 6 and 7. So what do you see from this Lakers team, and is this a strategic move for them?
It's so interesting how series go. Like, as you get older, you see it more just because you're watching these series and they're 2-0, 2-1. And you're like, hey, this series is done in 5. And then all of a sudden it's 2-2. And it's like, wait, this is going 7. And for the Lakers yesterday, I mean, Chris Paul's getting healthier. DeAndre Ayton's continuing to play well. But yeah, it just came down to the fact that AD was out. And they've had this ability to run lineups without LeBron where you run Schroeder and AD and you survive. Because offensively it's relatively skilled and you leave some good defenders out there, KCP, Caruso, Schroeder, Davis, and Drummond a lot of the time too. But this series seems like a totally different story to me now because the inability to stay afloat with LeBron out for the Lakers is so clear now because Schroeder's a good player, but he's not going to keep you afloat. And Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton will tear them apart in non-LeBron minutes right now. And it feels like 7. I also have noticed AD is a little soft, and I don't know if it's just me and I can't shake this feeling of like his injuries. A lot of guys might play through. And he's not one to underreact to an ankle tweak, I would say. But yeah, this one feels like it's going 7. Chris Paul is somewhat healthy again, and the Lakers will continue to get killed in non-LeBron minutes. I say AD sits Game 5 and comes back for Game 6 as a strategic play by Frank Vogel.
Yeah. I would say, though, DeAndre Ayton is having himself a series right now. After watching him this season, you could tell he's just such a soft player. I would say he still has some butterfingers, but the way he's just dominating Drummond in the paint is just remarkable. And I also think that also speaks to Drummond and how not good of a player he is, because every time he gets the ball into the hoop, he either gets fouled and he misses free throws, or he just gets swiped away by Chris Paul or Devin Booker in the paint, who are nasty defenders in there. So I think, I really think Ayton's really destroying Drummond in this key matchup that people are sometimes overlooking. But yeah, Chris Paul is getting better too. Even though if he's injured still with his shoulder, he's still able to make a huge impact in the game in terms of running the offense, controlling the pace of the game, throwing lobs to Ayton, all these things. He's able to make all these right reads on offense that, sure, you still need his mid-range, but the Suns can kind of scrape by without him, especially since Davis is going to be out for Game 5. So I think things are looking good for the Suns, and you're probably going to drop Game 6 if AD comes back. And then Game 7, you never know what happens. But you've seen LeBron's track history with Game 7. This kind of brings you back to the series against Indiana when it went to 7. LeBron plays the entire 48 minutes of the game and clutches that game for them with that game-winning 3. So, yeah, that's the series for the Lakers. Any other thoughts for this series?
I just think it's so interesting to me to see Devin Booker. Sure, he had a really good first game. Second game, he had over 30, but both him and AD had over 30 that game. And it felt like neither of them scored over 20. And then you look at the box score, and it's 17 made free throws for both of them. But Devin Booker continues to kind of be stuck on offense at times. He's had Caruso on him a lot of the time, and Caruso is an effective defender. He's not the smartest always, but he is very athletically gifted. And I am not a big Devin Booker fan. I had thought he would struggle. I hate people talking about him like he's Donovan Mitchell's superior. Um, I I see him still taking a back seat, whether it's Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton. He hasn't been able to step up yet. And I don't like people talking like he is the Suns' best player right now because he continues to be subpar to both Ayton and Chris Paul.
Yeah, I used to like Booker before, especially since he dropped that 70 bomb and still lost to the Celtics, I think. But I think he's more of a he is prone to temper tantrums a lot. Like even that dirty play on Schroeder, it was, I think, in game 3 or 4. And you could tell, like, good thing Crowder was there to kind of block his fall, but it looked like Schroeder was gonna fly out of the gym when he pushed him midair. But I think he's a dirty player, and more so than most people think. But I'm just gonna leave it at that. Either way, he's a good player. You got to give credit to him in this series. But moving on to the other LA series, the Clippers and the Mavs, and another injury kind of taking the storyline for this series again. Luka Doncic with his nerve thing in his neck. And reports have said today that it has gotten better, and they do have an extra day off before playing on Thursday, I believe. So I think this bodes well for the Mavs. But I think even just the Luka stuff aside, the way that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are playing in the last 2 games that led to their wins is just crazy. Like Kawhi is like shooting, I think, like he shot like 11 for 15 or something, or he only missed like 4 or 5 shots in each of the last 2 games, and just his shooting has been super hot. And I think the Clippers have kind of clamped down on Tim Hardaway Jr. a lot last game. Porzingis hasn't done really anything in this game. You look at the box scores, like what he's got 18 points. It doesn't seem like he got 18 points. But yeah, this series really took a huge turn after Dallas kind of shocking LA. And so series is tied 2-2. Assuming Luka will be healthy, where do you think this series is going to tilt to?
Yeah, this series, man, another series where it just feels over. It feels like a catastrophe for the Clippers. Everyone starts their talk radio show just joking about what a sad, sad franchise they are. But you look at this team, man, and playoff Rondo is a thing. Kawhi Leonard had one of the greatest playoff runs we've ever seen 2 years ago, and he wasn't bad in the bubble last year like people want to make him out to be just because he had one bad game versus Denver in game 7. And maybe we're starting to see a little, I don't want to say it too quickly, but a little bit of Indiana Paul George.
Yeah.
It's been a real revelation for this team. I don't know if they win this series, but it did really seem to me like a sweep was out of the question because, hey, any team with Rondo and Kawhi on the same roster in a playoff series wins a game. Like, without question, wins a game, should go deeper into the playoffs. I really like this Mavs team in terms of personnel. I don't personally like them, but I like how they're made up. And I think they have proper personnel. If Ty Lue starts listening to the media or continues to listen to them and not play Pat Bev, because Pat Bev just gets eaten by Luka inside, like just destroyed in the post. Rondo's been doing a better job picking the pocket. They've also been throwing, of course, Kawhi on him, who is better than Paul George. I think Paul George is a bit of a gambler at times on defense. But this series really all comes down to Luka, because when Luka is having a good game, no one can stop him. And when he has a good game, it's a double team to him every time. And that's when guys like Finney Smith, Kleber, Porzingis can start hitting threes and getting energy back into the team. Past couple games, he's not hitting his shots as much, and he really hasn't quite broken down that defense like he usually does. At least this last game for sure, The game before he had 41, but kind of struggled from the field regardless.
Yeah, for sure. And the playoffs are all about adjustments. And I think, yeah, like you said, the Clippers did make a couple of adjustments in terms of not playing Pat Bev a lot. You start Nick Batum over Zubats, and then you just completely bench Serge Ibaka because he's been out the entire season. I don't understand why you try to play Ibaka in the playoffs when he hasn't been right the entire year. Even though he's known for being a good player, like just the amount of layoff he's had, there's no way you can play him in a tight series against Dallas. But I think all things considered, I agree in terms of Paul George. You could see the Indiana vibes coming back. I think there was one play in the second quarter where he literally got the ball in the corner, like the corner, like super, like when the two lines meet, the baseline and the sideline, and he chucks up a three and it goes in. And it's like, okay, I think Paul George is kind of back. Playoff P is no more. But we'll see for the rest of the series. A lot of people are talking about how the Mavs won't win another game, and we'll see. I think the series is heading back to LA. It really depends on Luka's health. That's probably the one thing. But yeah, moving on quickly to the Blazers and Nuggets. That got me pretty hyped. I would say just one thing about the Blazers. Dame Lillard goes 1 for 10 against the Nuggets, and they still blow them out. And that's not because, not just because playoff Palace showed up, but I think it just shows how deep of a team the Blazers actually are. And I think that's overlooked a lot. And even just looking back a few months ago when a lot of people wanted to trade for Aaron Gordon, the Blazers were in the sweepstakes, and then they kind of they fell out of that. And look what they got in return: Norman Powell for Gary Trent Jr. And I think people tend to overlook that trade in like looking back, but now it's like, man, you have a high energy scorer, a starter. Gary Trent wasn't even started the entire season, and Powell's a guy who's willing to go to the rim, take the ball. And I think there's a couple adjustments that they made in terms of benching Enes Kanter, who's been horrible guarding Jokic. You'd match Nurkic's minutes with Jokic's minutes, and then you play Rondae Hollis-Jefferson when Jokic is off the floor to play more small ball and playing Powell more with Dame instead of playing with the second unit. So I think those are the adjustments that I found that really helped them pull away in their last game. So what are your thoughts on this series, Nate?
Yeah, it really comes down a lot to, obviously, Jokic is going to get his no matter what. But Monte Morris, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, who really hasn't been that great offensively since he came to the Nuggets, they'll have to step up. But it does come down to the fact that, hey, if you want to play this style where you're going toe-to-toe with the Blazers in a scoring fest, it's almost impossible because, yeah, they've got the 29th ranked defense of the league, but they've got the second ranked offense for a reason because you have CJ McCollum, Powell, and then obviously Dame. Simon's coming off the bench, who I still sing his praises all the time. Nurkic playing well. Just a whole team has really come together offensively, not so much defensively still. I'll still pick them apart defensively if we want to go down to those brass tacks. But you have to say that no matter what Denver has done so far offensively, it won't matter until they tighten up on defense consistently, because that's the only way that they're going to win. Once you get the Blazers into a 100 to 110 range, you're likely winning that game. But they've they have their holes where you have some reasonable perimeter defenders in Gordon, Porter Jr., who's improving. Morris Campazzo is not a good defender, but he's a little feisty. But Powell, CJ McCollum, and Damian Lillard all being able to drive and shoot has really killed them. And they're not great helping defense, and they need to tighten those holes up in their defense if they want to win this series.
Yeah, and I think there's no way Austin Rivers hits 6 or 7 threes again in a game. And I would say that was probably the only reason the Blazers lost game 3. It was because they did tie at 91 with like 6 minutes to go, and then Rivers just goes nuclear. So it's a make or miss league, but I think the Blazers have more experienced shooters, and even Melo as well, who hit a lot of clutch shots as well. You just can't guard, or the Nuggets don't have the personnel to guard 3 elite level guards, right? And so I think, the series is probably going to go to Portland. We'll see what happens in game 6, though, in terms of the adjustments that Denver can make. But I think their options are limited just because of not having Jamal Murray, not even having Will Barton as well, or PJ Dozier as well, who are actually not too bad defenders and lengthy guys you could throw at Dave Marcija or Norm. But that's that. And then really quickly, Hawks and Knicks. That's probably the only interesting other series within the Eastern Conference. Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Danilo Gallinari, Clapella's having himself a series. The Hawks are just outmatching the Knicks in terms of skill. And I think the only way the Knicks would win is just by pure grit. But the Knicks really just don't have enough firepower to match the Hawks offense. So what is your quick outlook on this series, and do you think this is over?
Hey man, we've been singing the Hawks praises all year long, just about how versatile the team is, how they have veterans mixed with young talent. Young talent hasn't even shown up sometimes in John Collins. DeAndre Hunter has not been as consistent as he was at the start of the season. Cam Reddish isn't playing. But you've got vets. You've got Bogdan. You've got Capella, who, wow. Yeah. So great this year. Just, like, the Rockets traded him for Covington. Like, he is a borderline defensive player of the year. And he averages 16 and 16 pretty much every game he's playing over 30 minutes. And he's just played so great. Like I said, Bogdan, Danilo, Capella, and then, of course, you have Lou Will coming off the bench, too. Like, just the ability to keep rolling out guys, rolling out fresh legs who are experienced or immensely talented. Like, Trae Young continues to blow away even my expectations in this series. I still don't love the way he plays. I think he's a hard player to play with. I actually prefer when Bogdan's leading the playmaking for the Hawks, just because I think it's a more balanced attack. But wow, they're so diverse in just the ways they can run different lineups through big lineups, 3-point shooting lineups. And I really like Julius Randle. But you can see, a lot of times when guys make an improvement from one year to the next year, you see the holes that existed in their game before in the playoffs, because you get nervous and you're not as confident and you start to revert back to the old habits. And usually it takes a year or a playoff run to actually break that trend. And then you become the player who you have been when you became the most improved player. You become that player in the playoffs the year after. Randall struggled. Barrett was good last game. Derrick Rose has probably been their most consistent player. You just can't win when Derrick Rose is your most consistent offensive player in 2021, despite Tibbs' best attempts to recreate a 2013 Bulls team who only ever made it to the conference semifinals.
I think you just need Jimmy on that team. Then it'll be recreated.
Joakim Noah. Hey, man.
Yeah, bring him back.
He was, fourth in MVP voting in 2014? Yeah. One of the weirdest seasons of all time. But
yeah, hey. For sure. Julius Randle, I think he's forcing everything, and he's too predictable. I think a lot of the times he's going to go left, and the way that the Hawks kind of overload that side, it really just shows, and he's trying to force everything. But he hasn't gotten to that point where he's the guy who's able to make tough shots. Or make tough shots on a consistent basis. So I think that's probably a huge factor that's coming into the losses for the Knicks. But yeah, I think this series is probably reaching its end very soon. And then last topic, the Celtics and the Nets. But it's not what was on the court, or I guess not in terms of basketball on the court things that kind of covered the headlines this past week. But it was more of Kyrie Irving. He kind of stomps on the Celtics logo after blowing them out in Game 4. And then after that, when he heads to the tunnel, a fan throws a water bottle at him. So Nate, what are your thoughts? Did Kyrie deserve this water bottle throwing because he stomped on the Celtics logo, or like, what are your thoughts on this?
Hey, I just think the fans saw Kyrie was looking a little dehydrated and wanted him to drink up for the next game, but clearly it wasn't taken that way. No, it's such a difficult thing to manage in the NBA because, like I was hearing this morning, people talking about the intimacy of the game where the fans are so closely involved in every single basketball game. Like baseball, you got nets. Hockey, you got glass in front of you. Football, it's such a big stadium that you're never really that close to the action. But NBA, you're right there. Like when they're walking off the tunnel, you can touch the players as they walk by. And that's part of the magic of the league, right? Because it feels so tangible, and like, hey, these players are so close to you. You can feel like their energy. You can really start to get into the game that way. And fan involvement in games has almost always been positive. You ask players if they prefer a couple fans being like belligerent versus not having fans at all, and obviously they want fans in, but it is getting a little ridiculous. Hey, I don't like Kyrie. I think he is really just continuing to show why Boston fans should hate him. Stomping on the logo, just kind of disrespecting the franchise as a whole, and kind of like claiming that their whole fan base is racist, despite it's a few off fans with everything that kind of that he chooses to represent that city. And it's a really tough issue, but Kyrie did not deserve this water ball thrown at him. These players are playing for the entertainment of the fans. They're going out there and giving their heart out. You can disrespect the city of Boston, and you can get like insults hollered at you all game, and those are fair. Hey, like them chanting, "We hate Kyrie" during the middle of the game, it's kind of deserved. I mean, I don't know if I would participate in that, but you can see where they're coming from. But as soon as you break that barrier of actually throwing something at someone, potentially hurting them, that is obviously when it takes it too far with sheer involvement in the game as a fan.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I guess the motive for fans is, it's one, because they want to get the attention on the internet, and two, is that I think the repercussions aren't as bad, but I think seeing the past couple of incidents now, I feel like they're kind of increasing the punishment for that in terms of finding them and arresting them and all these things, and lifetime bans and all that. But I think lifetime bans were already in place in like all of sports when it comes to these incidents. But like when you talk about the intimacy of basketball, like the courtside seats is what comes up to mind to me, and the harsh, or the potential reality if these things continue to happen is like, oh no, what if they put up barriers? And it's like, oh my goodness, you're gonna take out courtside seats because more fans are becoming more rowdy. It's like, oh my goodness, why are you like this, like kind of thing? Like you don't want to see things that are taken away and things that remove the intimacy of the game. Like who doesn't love courtside seats? Like that's the closest you can get to athletes in probably any sport, right? You're literally face to face with them, and you can see them, and you're like a foot away from them, right? And it's such a cool experience, and I think the attitude of some of the fans in the past few incidents kind of ruins that moment where, or even just sparks that thought. It's like, oh man, do we really have to do something to prevent the fans from having these incidents happen? And you hear the players talk about it all the time, like protect us, but it's like you have to preserve the intimacy of the game. So I think it's got to be a balance between the two, but you're always going to get fans like those anyway. Just like everyone says, like it's the playoffs. Things are heightened a lot, but at the same time, you still have to be civil about it and not do stuff like that. So yeah, that's all I got.
It really just comes down to the fact that, like, hey, you know, these players often feed off insults from the fans. I think there's a certain line where you can cross. Like, if you're talking trash about their game as a fan, it's really no big deal at all. Some players actually really enjoy it, I'm sure. But, you know, there's a line that you cross in both, one, for racism, two, getting their family involved, like you've heard, like with Russell Westbrook in the past.
Yeah.
But it does, like, being a fan is so fun because you have a lot of freedom to mock a player who comes in and they feed off of it, and it's not a big deal. But it's just like straddling that line. Like, you have to be very careful because, hey, you know, like, you're a person, they're a person. If someone hucks a water ball at you, you're definitely going to react in a negative way. So it really becomes like they almost see them as kind of these figures and not real people. And that is kind of a bit of a continuing trend in the past while, especially with the social media age.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like the things that the fans did, like, let alone just basketball aside, you just can't do that in human society in general. You just can't throw a water ball at someone. You can't pour popcorn over somebody or spit at someone, right? And I think also, like, the good example of fans being involved in the game, you just got to look at New York and what the New York fans did, where they literally handed out forms on what to chant against Atlanta. Chant Trae Young is balding. That is like the best you can ever get from the New York fan base. That was so funny. You need more of that. I think there has to be a different chant for Game 5 in Knicks and Hawks. There has to be. Do you have any thoughts on that?
For sure. That is funny, you know. As the great philosopher David Jacoby said, you can be mean if you're funny. And that is one of those instances where you are being mean but also funny. And it just, like, people love to joke around, and just not taking it too far is the key there. But hey, you know, I don't know what else you can say about Trae Young. I think obviously balding looks like a 2-year-old toddler. But they're gonna have to become a little more creative to create some excitement for that New York Knicks squad, so they don't go out in 5 tomorrow.
Yeah, they gotta find other ways to roast him. But yeah, that does it for our pod. The reason it's so short today because we want to get back to watching the playoffs. The Grizzlies and Jazz are playing right now.
Oh, let's go Jazz! Let's go Jazz!
The Jazz are up 11 with 4 minutes left in the third right now, but Mitchell with 24, 7 assists.
Oh, that's a good playmaking night for him.
Yeah.
Man, I hate this narrative about, I don't know, I had John Morant on my fantasy team, and John Morant and DeAndre Ayton, and they became my 2 most hated players in the league because they sucked this year. They were absolutely terrible. And then I was talking mad trash about them, and all of a sudden they're like the best 2 young players in the playoffs.
Man,
I really...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I really don't know what's going on, but man, I don't know if it's fun to watch or terrible to watch because all I can feel is the agony.
Every game this series against the Jazz, Ja has tried to posterize Rudy Gobert. like one of these instances, he's going to get it. I think. What do you think? Is he actually going to posterize Gobert?
The repercussions for getting blocked now are less severe. Because if he lands a poster in one of these games, that is all you're ever going to hear about. Not Rudy's 4 blocks on him the games before.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we'll
for sure.
see. But I think you'll only hear about that if that happens after this series.
Ja probably has the most like what if dunks in the history of the league.
Yeah,
like,
that jump over Kevin Love.
Yeah. That would have blown the entire NBA up. But okay, that does it for our pod. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs. It'll be a fun ride for the rest of the way, and we'll see you next time.